Namo Namaha Bhaktam Sarvesham Hardam Swagatam. Welcome back to the channel Sanskrit Sopanam. I hope you are doing great. I'm also good. And what are we going to do in today's video? Okay, so today's video, I am going to try to give an overview of how to approach Sanskrit. Okay, see, the thing is, when we want to learn something new, and in this case, when we want to learn Sanskrit, so if we are not able to take the traditional route of learning Sanskrit through the courses that are offered by different educational institutes. Okay, so given the time schedule that we might have a day job, and along with that day job, it is difficult to attend those classes. So we might have our own reasons, but we might not be able to take the traditional route. So, and we want to learn Sanskrit so that we can read our shastras. So we start to do it by our own swadhyaya, by our own self-learning. But when we start to do that, Google and YouTube, when we do the research in our own way, we get bombardment of so many information that you can start with this book, you can start with that book, you can start with this concept, you can start with that concept. And after spending few years in Sanskrit, there is a clear process that at least I have come to understood that if you want to learn Sanskrit with the purpose of to be able to read our shastras, what shastras? So at least the common shastras that we know of. So our itihasas, that is Ramayana, Mahabharata, or you have Puranas, or you have Bhagavad Gita, or you have different stotram, different stutis, the different shlokas that we in our day-to-day practice, in our day-to-day worship to God, we chant those shlokas. So for all these simple things, for all these shastra studying, I should be able to learn Sanskrit. I should be able to know and understand the words in Sanskrit, so that at one point I will not need the help of translation and I can read Sanskrit in its own form. Okay, so with all said and done, let me start this video on an overview of how to approach Sanskrit and what are the different grammatical concepts and how you should prioritize them. Okay, so Sanskrit language and how can we approach it? Okay, so when we see this verse, so on the first look, this verse looks very intimidating because this entire first line of this verse, this entire line is combined into a single word. And often when we come across Sanskrit verses, we have seen this thing that multiple words can combine together to form a single word. But for a beginner, it becomes very intimidating. That on the very first look of it, it seems like that this verse is impossible to understand. This verse is impossible to decode. So what should be the first step? So before I tell you what is that first step, let me go forward and do something with this verse. And now this same verse is rewritten like this. Okay, and now looking at this form, this verse does not feel as intimidating as it did in the original version. Okay, and what I have done? I have simply separated all the individual words that are present in this shloka, in this verse. So now you can clearly see this first line, which seemed like a single big one word. Now you can see there are multiple individual words within. Manasi, Vachasi, Karyam, Anyat, Anyat. And you can also see so many words are repeating. Okay. The same thing you can observe in the second line also. So whatever we did here to the original verse, but immediately this verse looks simplified, right? Now what did I do? So I did the Sandhi Vichcheda. Okay. I did the Sandhi Vichcheda. Vichcheda means separation. Sandhi Vichcheda means separating the individual words present in the shloka. Okay, and now don't think that I still can't make out the meaning. Okay, you cannot make out the meaning because you are not familiar with these words. That is another thing. But just by doing Sandhi Vichcheda, you can see that the verse is already simplified. Okay, so I hope you are getting the point here. Now if we take another example, say another example shloka. So this is a very famous verse from Bhagavad Gita. Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karmaphal hetur bhurma te sangostva karmani. Okay, and now you already know that before approaching this verse, first I have to separate the individual words present in the shloka. So what seemed like a single word in the original shloka, when you do the Vichcheda, you get the individual words present in it. Karmani, Eva, Adhikaraha, Te. These combine together into this seemingly looking single word, Karmanyeva Adhikaraste. Okay, but we can only understand the meaning of any verse when we know what are the different words that are present in the verse. So this Sandhi Vichcheda is the first step, as you can already see. And so to be able to do Sandhi Vichcheda, you should know Sandhi rules. Okay, these are the rules that will help you to separate the words in a given verse. So now this is the first step, you know. And under the Sandhi rules, now we are going to see what are the different Sandhi rules and what are the ones that we should prioritize first. Okay, if we are a beginner, if we are starting, so there are so many different Sandhi rules. We don't need to read and study all of them together. we need to prioritize the most common, the most important ones first. So that is what we are going to see now. Okay, so what are the different types of Sandhi rules? There are three categories. One is Swara Sandhi, one is Visarga Sandhi, and one is Vyanjana Sandhi. See, Swara Sandhi, just by looking at its name, you can tell when the vowels are involved, when the Swara is involved, so that becomes Swara Sandhi. And when a Visarga is involved, that becomes Visarga Sandhi. And in that same way, when the Vyanjana, when the consonants are involved, that becomes Vyanjana Sandhi. And now let us first start by doing an overview of this Swara Sandhi. Okay, so see, if it is a Swara Sandhi, so what I mean, that there is any vowel and then there is another vowel. See, suppose there are two words, Rama and Ishwara. So in this Rama, in the end, you have this Aswara, right? And then in this Ishwara, as the first letter, you have this Iswara, right? So what do we have here essentially is that the first word is ending with a vowel and the second word is starting with a vowel. So basically, the swaras are involved. That is why I have written that any vowel plus any vowel. So that will bring a Sandhi change. Okay, so pretty straightforward here. And now I can rewrite this same thing like this, that you have any of the vowel that is followed by any other vowel. So this situation is going to get this Sandhi change. What kind of Sandhi? Swara Sandhi. Okay, and see, when I'm writing this A, so this A is basically including this Dirgha form also, Dirgha A. Okay, I'm not repeating it. So this E is basically including this Dirgha E also. It is just the long form of that same vowel, Dirgha E. Okay. And then see, there is also this swara, that is this Li swara. But I am not taking it because it is very rare in the Shastra, in the day-to-day Shastra text that you are going to read in Sanskrit. So I am not taking it here right now. But the important point is, for a Swara Sandhi, this is the situation, that there can be any vowel followed by any other vowel. It will bring a certain Sandhi change. And now I can rewrite this also like this, that there can be three distinct situations here. First situation is that if there is a swara that is followed by any other swara, then if there is e, u, ri followed by any other swara, and then there is a, I, o, au followed by any other swara. Okay, I am just presenting all the possible situations that you can have for Swara Sandhi to happen. Okay, and again, please keep this in mind that when I am writing a, I am basically including the Dirgha form also. Similarly, if I am writing e, I am basically including the Dirgha e also. Okay. But anyways, for Swara Sandhi to happen, these are the three situations that can arise. And now let us do an overview of each situation one by one. So in the first situation, you have a swara which is followed by any other vowel. And what can be other vowels? So it can be the same vowel, then it can be a plus simple vowel. What are simple vowels? So the basic vowels a, I, u, ri, all these are called as simple vowels, because compared to them you have diphthong. What are diphthong? Diphthong are a, I, o, au. So see, I am just using a technical name for them. Okay. But the main point is, this is how you can visualize these situations. That after an a swara, there can be a same vowel. Then in another situation, after an a, there can be the simple vowels. The simple vowels basically means there can be any vowel in e, u and ri. And then another situation can be that if after an a, there are diphthong. So these are basically all the possible situations that you can have with this a swara. Okay, and a again, a means a and dirgha a. Okay, and now see what happens. That if after an a, you have the same vowel. That if after a, you have another a. So what becomes? Dirgha Sandhi. Then if after an a, you have simple vowels. That means you have e, you have u, and you have ri. That are the simple vowels. You cannot take a, because that is already covered here. That if after an a, you have the same vowel. Okay. So a plus simple vowel basically means if after an a, you have e, u and ri. So you get the Guna Sandhi niyam. And then if after an a, you have diphthongs a, I, o, au. So you get the Vriddhi Sandhi niyam. Okay, and with this, we cover this entire situation. That if after an a, you have any vowel, what are the different possibilities? Now we'll come to this. That if after e, u, ri, you have any vowel, what are the possibilities? Let us see that. If after e, u, ri, you have the same vowel. That if after an e, you have another e. It can be any e, long or short does not matter. That is, if after an e, you have the same vowel, so Dirgha Sandhi. Just like what happens with a. That if after an a, you have another a, so that is the Dirgha Sandhi. Same thing happens here also. That if after e, u and ri, you have the same vowel, so you get Dirgha Sandhi. But if after an e, u and ri, you have any other vowel, so you get the Yana Sandhi. Okay, so basically if after an u, suppose you have any other swara, say e, so you will get the Yana Sandhi. If you have ri, you will get the Yana Sandhi. If you have a, you will get the Yana Sandhi. Because if after an e, u, ri you have any other vowel which is not same, so you are going to get yana sandhi. Okay, so now we have seen this situation and we have also seen this situation. Now what about this? That if after diphthongs you have any vowel, what happens? And this one is actually the easiest. That if after diphthongs, that is if after a, I, o, au, you have any vowel, the rule is same, ayadi sandhi. This is also called as yanta vanta desha sandhi. Okay, so this is very easy to remember that if after diphthongs you have any vowel, there is only one sandhi niyama, that is this ayadi sandhi. And so now under this swara sandhi, we know these are the most important sandhis: dirgha sandhi, guna sandhi, vriddhi sandhi, yana sandhi, ayadi sandhi. And see, I'm not saying these are all the swara sandhis. There are other swara sandhis also, but with those examples, with those situations, I wanted to show that these are the most important ones. If you handle these swara sandhis first, if you prioritize them first, then it is going to take care of a lot of things that you're going to read in Sanskrit Shastra. So under swara sandhi, these are the sandhis that you have to prioritize first. You have to learn them first. Okay, so I hope this overview of swara sandhi, this makes sense. Now let us go to the visarga sandhi. Okay, and now see, when we say visarga sandhi, what we mean? We mean that visarga is involved. And how can visarga be involved? There will be some vowel with which the visarga is attached, and then there will be a letter following it. And why do I say that there will be any vowel with which visarga is attached? Because visarga cannot attach itself to the vyanjana. If you think this visarga is attached to ta, no, it is not attached to ta. Because here in this bhavata, this takara has this a with it. So the visarga, of course, is always attaching itself to some vowel. So that is why I have written that for visarga sandhi to happen, this is the situation, that there will be any vowel which is followed by a visarga, basically the word which will be ending with a visarga, and then following it there can be any letter in Sanskrit. And because visarga is there, so we will have visarga sandhi. Okay, and now let me rewrite this thing like this, that there is visarga, and following the visarga you either have a vowel or you have a consonant. Because again, vowel and consonant, these are all the letters in Sanskrit, right? Okay, but now I am going to rewrite this thing again. How? That after a visarga you have either a vowel or you have a soft consonant or a hard consonant. Okay, and this distinction, the soft consonant and the hard consonant, this is important because in a lot of sandhi, this distinction comes in play. You will see how. But see, visarga sandhi, what was the premise? That you have any vowel which is followed by visarga and then you have any letter following it. What can be that letter? It can be any vowel or it can be any consonant. And within the consonant also, it can either be a soft consonant or it can be a hard consonant. So this is the premise for visarga sandhi to happen. Okay, and now let us explore the possibilities out of this. So see, there is this one possibility, that there is any vowel except a and dirgha a. So before visarga, you have any vowel except a and dirgha a. And then afterwards, you have either a vowel or a soft consonant. If this is the situation, you have the rutva sandhi. Okay, but seeing this, you will ask me this question, that what if there is a or dirgha a with the visarga? What happens then? So let us see that. So see, in that a and dirgha a also, let me first see dirgha a. That if the visarga is along with the dirgha a, and then you have vowel and soft consonant, so you get visarga lopa sandhi. Okay, again I am not going to go deep into the niyama, I am just telling you the situation under which this visarga lopa sandhi happens. That you have dirgha a followed by visarga, which is still followed by any vowel or soft consonant, so you get the visarga lopa sandhi. Lopa means disappearance, the visarga disappears. Okay, but what about rasva a? What about the short a? So now let us see that situation also. This situation again we can divide into two. That if after a rasva a, if after a short a you have the visarga, and then you have any vowel except a, except that same rasva a, then you get the visarga lopa sandhi. But otherwise, if you have this a or any soft consonant, you get the utva sandhi. Okay, and now see what we covered. We have covered that any vowel with visarga, if it is followed by a vowel or a soft consonant, this portion of visarga sandhi we have already covered. But the question is, what about hard consonant? That what if there is a hard consonant following it? And so we have another sandhi, that is this sattva sandhi. Okay, this is also called as sakara sandhi. Similarly, utva was called as ukara sandhi. Similarly, sattva sandhi is also called as sakara sandhi. And this is the premise, that after the visarga you have any hard consonant, then what you get is this sattva sandhi niyam, sakara sandhi niyam. Okay, and with this we get this situation. This is the conclusion, that under this Visarga Sandhi, Sattva Sandhi, Rutva Sandhi, Utva Sandhi, and Visarga Lopa Sandhi, these are the Sandhis that you should learn first. You should prioritize. Why? Because again, as we saw, it covers a wide range of situation. It basically covers all the possible situation you can have for a Visarga Sandhi to happen. Okay, again, there are few additional Sandhis, there are few exceptions to few Sandhi. The last Sandhi, Sattva Sandhi, it also has few exceptions, few changes. Again, we are not going to go into that depth. Okay, and that is why I'm also using their common names also. These sandhis are otherwise referred to with their sutra, that Yana Sandhi Iko Yanachi, or you have this Sattva Sandhi, it is another sutra. So these sandhis are generally referred to with their sutra, but we are not going to go into that. We are just remembering them with their common names. And we, under all those categories also, we are trying to prioritize what all sandhis we should learn first. And that is, I'm showing you with that example. That see, for a Swara Sandhi to happen, this is the situation. And if we explore that situation, these are the different possibilities and these are the different Sandhi Niyama. Same thing goes for Visarga Sandhi. That for a Visarga Sandhi to happen, this is the premise. And if we explore all the possible situations under this, these are the Sandhis that come out of it. So these are the Sandhis that you should prioritize, that you should learn first. Okay. So with this, I hope you have got an overview of Swara Sandhi and Visarga Sandhi. And now let us come to the Vyanjana Sandhi. And again, what should be the premise for Vyanjana Sandhi? The premise should be, there should be any consonant and then it is followed by any letter. It can be any letter. The thing is, there should be at least a consonant involved. Then only it is a consonant Sandhi, Vyanjana Sandhi. And see, this Vyanjana Sandhi category, this is pretty wide. Okay, it has a lot of different Sandhis, lot of Sandhis which only apply to certain situations, lot of Sandhis which are tailored for certain Niyamas. So this Sandhi has a lot of different Sandhis. I am just going to mention just few handful here. Okay, so let us see few common Vyanjana Sandhi. So see, what is the situation here? Any consonant except the semi-vowel and nasal. So the first word can end with any consonant except a semi-vowel and nasal. And if it is followed by either a vowel or a soft consonant, then Jashtva Sandhi. This is the niyama that happens. Okay, so this is one situation. See, this group, no, any consonant except semi-vowel and nasal. This group is very common when you do Vyanjana Sandhi, and this group is represented by this Pratyahara, Jhal Pratyahara. Again, if you have seen that Maheshwar Sutrani, with the video on Maheshwar Sutrani, you will understand this Jhal Pratyahara reference. But this Jhal Pratyahara refers to this, any consonant except semi-vowel and nasal. And this group as such is used quite often in different kinds of Vyanjana Sandhi. Okay. And similarly, you see this group also. This group is also very commonly seen in different Sandhi rules, vowel plus soft consonant. This group is also very common. Okay, this entire group is represented by Ash Pratyahara. Okay, just mentioning an extra detail, ignore that if you are not aware of this thing. The premise is any consonant except semi-vowel and nasal. If it is followed by a vowel or a soft consonant, then Jashtva Sandhi. This is the niyama. Okay, and compared to this, if the same group is now followed by any hard consonant, then Charatva Sandhi. That is the niyama. Okay, so by comparison also you can remember a lot of different Sandhi rules. Like we did here, that first the following letter is any vowel or soft consonant, so it is a Jashtva Sandhi, and then there is a hard consonant following it, so it is a Charatva Sandhi. Okay, the niyama changes. Okay, and then we see this Sandhi, that if there is a Sakara or a Ta Varga letter, Ta Varga is Ta, Tha, Da, Dha, Na. That these 5 letters belong to the Ta Varga, right? Ta, Tha, Da, Dha, Na. So if there is a Sakara, a Sa or a Ta Varga which is in contact with a Sha or a Cha Varga, then Schutva Sandhi happens. And now very similar to this, that if Sa or Ta Varga is in contact with Sha or Ta Varga, then that is the Shtutva Sandhi. Okay. Again a very common Sandhi, very useful while you are creating Kridantas. And then lastly we can see another Vyanjana Sandhi, that is this. That if there is any consonant except these few, that is basically the sibilants and this Ra. These Ha, Sha, Sha, Sa, these are the sibilants, the Ushma Vyanjana and this Ra. So you can have any consonant except these, and if it is followed by a nasal consonant, then that is the Anunasika Sandhi. Okay, and with this we can conclude that if we are starting with Vyanjana Sandhi, consonant Sandhi, then these are the Sandhis that we can prioritize. These are the Sandhis that we can learn first. Okay, and with this, we have seen an overview of the different Sandhi categories and the different Sandhi rules under these categories, Swara Sandhi, Visarga Sandhi and Vyanjana Sandhi. That what is the general premise for each of this category, and under each of these categories, what are the Sandhi niyamas that we can prioritize and we can learn first. Okay, and this wraps up our overview on Sandhi rules. And again, see, the scope of this video is not to study all the Sandhi niyamas, because that is a topic for a separate video. The intention of this video is that we are doing an overview of all the different grammatical concepts in Sanskrit and how we have to prioritize them. And so now we know the first important thing, that we have to learn Sandhi niyamas so that we can do Sandhi Vichcheda, so that we can separate the words of a given Sanskrit shloka that we are reading. Only when we can separate the words, then only we can individually understand the meaning of these words, and then only we can understand the meaning of the entire verse, entire shloka. Okay, so the importance of Sandhi Vichcheda and what are the different Sandhi rules, I hope you got an overview of it. Now let us move ahead. So now let us come back to that example verse that I took before, Karmanya Vadhikaraste. Okay, now when we do the Sandhi Vichcheda, because okay, now we know the Sandhi niyamas, we are able to do Sandhi Vichcheda. So when we do Sandhi Vichcheda, these are the different words present in the verse. Now, if we see these words, now when we analyze these words, this is what we understand. That see, this Karmani, this is a Namapada. Eva, this is an Avyaya. Adhikaraha, this is a Namapada. Te, this is a Namapada. Ma, this is an Avyaya. Similarly, this is Namapada, Namapada, Avyaya, Namapada. Astu, this is a Kriyapada. But all the different words that are there in the Sanskrit words, these are the categorization of those words. That some words are Namapada, some words are Avyaya, and some words are Kriyapada. Okay, and same thing, let us take another example. So this is another verse. Okay, so this is one very beautiful verse from Ashtavakra Gita. Mai anandam hambodho jagadvichi subhavataha udetu vastamayatu name vriddhir nachakshatihi. Okay, beautiful verse from Ashtavakra Gita. We are not going to go into the meaning of this, otherwise I'll just get carried away. The point is, we have this Sanskrit verse. Now we know we have to do the Vichcheda first. So we do the Sandhi Vichcheda and we separate the words, right? And again, if we analyze the words, we see the same pattern. That few words are Namapada, like this, Mai, Jagat, Vichi, all these are Namapada. Then few words are Avyaya, like this, Na, Cha, all these are Avyaya. And then we also have few words like Ayatu, Udetu, these are Kriyapada. So again the same categorization, that you have Namapada, you have Avyaya and you have Kriyapada. And with this we can infer one very important point, that what makes a Sanskrit verse. And what makes a verse? Of course, the words, the different padas, the different words, they make a Sanskrit verse. And what are these different padas? So these are the three categories. These are the three most important categories that makes a Sanskrit verse. That the word can either be a Namapada. What is a Namapada? So all the nouns, all the pronouns, all the adjectives, what we study in English, the nouns, pronouns and adjectives, all these kind of words, they are called as Namapada. And what is a Kriyapada? So of course you can know that Kriyapada is the verbs. All the verbs, they fall under this category of Kriyapada. And what is an Avyaya? So Avyaya, this in English it is called as indeclinables. Avyaya, these are some words which have fixed form and fixed meaning. Okay, such kind of indeclinables, such kind of words are called as Avyaya. But the point is, in each Sanskrit shloka, in each Sanskrit verse that you are going to read, all the words that are present in that verse, all those words will fall under either of these categories. That either that word will be a Namapada, which means it is either a noun, a pronoun or an adjective, or it is a Kriyapada, which means it is a verb, or it is an Avyaya. And now you will know where we are headed. That we have to explore these categories now. Okay, that under these categories, Namapada, Kriyapada and Avyaya, what is it that we have to know? And under each of these categories, what are different grammatical concepts that we should know and how to prioritize them? So each of these categories now we will see one by one. Okay, so now let us see what all we need to know to identify Namapada in a given verse. And again, what are Namapadas? So the different nouns, pronouns and adjectives. So what all do we need to know in order to be able to identify the nouns, pronouns and adjectives present in a given Sanskrit verse? Okay, and for a Namapada, these are the four things that are an absolute must. That for every Namapada that you encounter in any Sanskrit verse, you should know what is the Pratipadika of that Namapada, what is the Linga, what is the gender of this Pratipadika, and what is the Vibhakti and the Vachana. So for example, in that shloka karmanye vadika raste, the first namapada that you encounter is this karmani. So this is the namapada, this is a word form. So for this karmani, you should know the pratipadika from which this form is coming, what is the linga, the gender of this pratipadika, and in which vibhakti and vachana this pratipadika is. Okay, so these are the essential details that you should know. Okay, and now when we talk about pratipadika, so the way we identify, the way we understand this pratipadika is by what letter it is ending, and again what is the gender of that pratipadika, because gender in Sanskrit is not based on what object does it represent. No, the gender is inherent with the word itself, that it is pullinga masculine, it is strilinga feminine, it is neuter gender napumsaklinga. So that gender is inherent in the word itself. Okay, so the pratipadika, what are pratipadikas, by the way, if you are not aware of this? So pratipadika is the base word. Think of it like this, that pratipadika is that source from which all the different word forms come. That Rama, this is the pratipadika from which you can get different forms. Ramasya, Rame, Ramanam, Ramahi. So all these different forms that you use in a Sanskrit text, so all these different forms are coming from the single base word, that is Rama. So that Rama is the pratipadika, that is that base word. Okay, and whenever we use any word in Sanskrit, we don't use it in the pratipadika state. No, it has to be in some or another form. Okay, that pratipadika just tells you it is coming from that word, that is the base. Okay, so for every namapada, for every word form, you will have a base word, that is this pratipadika. And this pratipadika is generally referred to by the letter with which it is ending and the gender of it. So for example, you have this pratipadika manas. This manas, what is the meaning of manas? Manas means mind. Okay, that is how we translate it in English. Manas means mind. So this pratipadika manas, it is ending with sa, right? It is ending with the sakara. It is ending with the sa letter. And the gender of this pratipadika is neuter gender. And this is how we represent this pratipadika. That I say manas, it is a sakaranta napumsaklinga pratipadika. It is a sakaranta ending with a sakara. Okay, ending with a sakara, that means ending with this sa letter. So it is a sakaranta napumsaklinga, that is neuter gender pratipadika. So this is a way we represent all the pratipadikas in Sanskrit, that with which letter it is ending and what is the gender. So similarly, if we take another example, say guru. So again, guru, this word, this pratipadika, we know the meaning is teacher, right? That is guru. Guru is ending with u. You can already see that guru is ending with the u swara. And what is the gender of this pratipadika? It is masculine gender. Okay, so with this information, how we are going to name this pratipadika guru? We are going to say guru is a ukaranta pullinga pratipadika. That it is ending with the u ukara. So it is an ukaranta pullinga pratipadika. Okay, that is how we name this guru. That is how we describe this pratipadika guru. Okay, and if we take another example, so we have this pratipadika mala. And on seeing this pratipadika, you can see it is ending with a dirgha a. And what is the gender of this pratipadika? So it is a feminine gender. I'll tell you this thing, that all the pratipadikas, all the words that end with any dirgha swara. So if a word ends with a long vowel, if it ends with a dirgha swara, then in 99% of cases, the gender is feminine gender. Okay, but anyways, mala, how can we represent this pratipadika? That it is a akaranta ending with a akara. So it is a akaranta strilinga pratipadika. Okay, I hope this thing makes sense. So pratipadika giving us two information with which letter it is ending and what is the gender, and that is how we represent any pratipadika. And see, what is the importance of this categorization of pratipadika? That suppose I take this pratipadika balaka. Now balaka, it is ending with a raswa a. So balaka, it is an akaranta, and the inherent gender of this pratipadika is pullinga, masculine gender. So balaka, it is an akaranta pullinga pratipadika. But what is the use of this categorization? See, the use is, this categorization is important. Why? Because now all the words that follow the same categorization. Say Rama. Rama is also an akaranta pullinga pratipadika. Say Vriksha, that means tree. Vriksha is also an akaranta pullinga pratipadika. Now say Prashna. Prashna means question. So Prashna also is an akaranta pullinga pratipadika. So all the words that fall under the same category, they are going to have similar kind of forms. So what are the forms that we will see shortly, but that is the use of this categorization. That suppose I only know the forms of balaka, but now whatever words follow the same categorization, that akaranta pullinga pratipadika, for all of them, the forms will be same as the forms of balaka. So you don't have to remember the forms of all the words. No, there are distinct categories. You take any one example from each category, and if you remember the form of that one single word, then all the words that fall under that same category, they are going to have the same kind of forms. Okay, so that is the use of this categorization. Akaranta pullinga, ikaranta strilinga, chakaranta, it can also end with a consonant. Suppose, for example, you have this word manas. Manas, it is ending with a consonant. Sakaranta napumsaklinga pratipadika. Now, similar to this manas, you can have any other pratipadika which is also ending with sa and which is also neuter gender. So that word also will have the same form as manas. So that is why we represent any pratipadika with the letter it is ending and the gender it is in. Okay, because that categorization is important. But anyways, for any namapada, you should know the pratipadika and the linga. Okay. Now, what about vibhakti and vachana? See, as I said, the namapada, that is all the forms, all the word forms, all the words that you will see, that you encounter while reading any Sanskrit text, all those namapada, all those word forms, they originate from the base word, that is pratipadika. But something happens due to which the pratipadika becomes the namapada, right? That this Rama, something happens due to which it becomes Ramasya. Suppose it is one form Ramasya. That same Rama can also become Ramahi. Okay. But how does this change happens from Pratipadika to Namapada? And that is where we see this Vibhakti Vachana table that all of you might have seen. So this table looks something like this. I'm sure all of you have seen this thing. The Vibhakti Vachana table, that you have 7 Vibhaktis, Prathama till Saptami. Then you also have this Sambodhana Vibhakti and Ek Vachana, Dui Vachana, Bahu Vachana. So this table, every one of you will be familiar with. And for every Pratipadika, say you have this Pratipadika Karman. Karman, this means work. Karman, this means work or action. This Karman is a Nakaranta. Why Nakaranta? Because it is ending with a Na. So Nakaranta and Napumsak Linga. The inherent gender of this word is neuter gender. So it is a Nakaranta Napumsak Linga Pratipadika. Okay, so for this Karman Pratipadika, these are all the different forms. These are all the different forms this same Pratipadika can have. That this Karman can be Karma, it can be Karmana, it can be Karmabhyam, it can be Karmanoho, it can be Karmanam, it can be Karmasu. So based on the Vibhakti, whether it is Prathama Vibhakti, Dutiya Vibhakti, Tritiya Vibhakti, and based on the number, Ek Vachan, Dui Vachan, Bahu Vachana, a single Pratipadika can have these many forms. Okay, so this is the Vibhakti and the Vachana table, right? And now let us go back to that example verse, Karmanye Vadhikaraste. In this, the first word that we saw was this Karmani. So this Karmani, it is a Namapada. So since it is a Namapada, we immediately know that there are 4 things we have to know about this Karmani. That what is the Pratipadika, what is the gender, what is the Vibhakti, and what is the Vachana. Okay, so this Karmani, this is coming from Karman Pratipadika. And where do we find Karmani? We find it here. So for Karmani, now we have all the information. That Karmani comes from Karman Pratipadika. It is a Napumsak Linga. It is a neuter gender Pratipadika. It is in Saptami Vibhakti and it is in Ekavachana. Okay, so this Namapada Karmani, Pratipadika, Karman, Ling, Napumsak Linga, Vibhakti, Saptami Vibhakti, Vachana, Ekvachana. Okay, so for every Namapada, you should know these 4 essential information. And please make this a habit that whenever you are reading any Sanskrit text, any Sanskrit shloka, and if you are able to identify that this word is a Namapada, then don't move ahead until you know these 4 things about that Namapada. That from what Pratipadika it is coming, what is the gender of that Pratipadika, and this particular Namapada, this particular form is in what Vibhakti and what Vachana. Okay, so these are the 4 essentials that you should know for every Namapada. It is like your own self-check. But now if I move on, so there are few observations about these Pratipadikas. And these observations are important. Why? Because see, you can say that, okay, I understand your point. That categorization of Pratipadika, that it is an Akaranta Pullinga, it is an Ikaranta Strilinga, that categorization of Pratipadika is important. I get it why. Because all the words that fall under that same category, all those words will have similar kind of forms. That I understand. But you will say that there are still so many different kinds of Pratipadika. Rama, it is an Akaranta Pullinga Pratipadika. Phala, it is an Akaranta but Napumsaklinga Pratipadika. So the forms will be different. Then you have Kavi, it is an Ikaranta Pullinga Pratipadika, forms will be different. Then you have, say, Vari. Vari is an Ikaranta Napumsaklinga Pratipadika, forms will be different. Then you have, say, Mati. Mati is an ikaranta strilinga pratipadika. Now again the forms will be different. So okay, I understand that even though if I know one example from each category, then it reduces a lot of work for me. But there is still so much work because there is still so many different kinds of pratipadikas that there can be, and each word will have these many forms. You see, prathama, dutiya, tritiya, chaturthi, vibhakti, ekvachan, dvivachan, bahuvachan. Each pratipadika has basically 24 forms. So for each pratipadika you have 24 forms. You have so many different kinds of pratipadikas. It is still so much work, and this still intimidates a lot of people. That this vibhakti vachana, this vibhakti table, it scares a lot of people. So see, even though I agree that there is still a lot of work remembering all the 24 forms of different kinds of pratipadikas, it is still so much work. But if you move ahead in with some smartness, that if you start to see these observations, if you start to compare the forms of one pratipadika to another, start making little observations, then this work reduces further. And what I mean by that we will see under this section, that few observations about these pratipadikas. So see, there's this observation that dvivachana forms for prathama and dutiya vibhakti, they are same. And now see, I'll use this Ashtadhyayi website to elaborate on this point. See, Rama, it is a akaranta pullinga pratipadika. So these are all the forms of Rama. What I said, that for prathama and dutiya vibhakti, the dvivachana forms are the same. And as you can see here, for both prathama and dutiya vibhakti, the dvivachana form is Ramau and Ramau. And this does not just apply to Rama. See, if I take example of Nadi, Nadi is an ikaranta strilinga pratipadika, a different category of pratipadika. Ikaranta strilinga, Nadi. But here also, the dvivachana forms are same. Nadyau, Nadyau. And then we can take another pratipadika also, say Madhu. Madhu is an ukaranta napumsaklinga pratipadika, a different category of pratipadika. But again, the dvivachana forms for prathama and dutiya are the same. Okay, and the same thing you can see for different kinds of pratipadika. Manas, a sakaranta napumsaklinga pratipadika, dvivachana form is same. Manasi, Manasi. Same thing Bhagavat, Bhagavantau, Bhagavantau. Same thing Karman. So see, this is one observation that can reduce your work a bit. And then similar kind of observations can be made. See, dvivachan forms for tritiya, chaturthi, panchami vibhakti. For three vibhaktis, the dvivachan forms, it is the same. And then for shashti and saptami vibhakti also, the dvivachana forms are the same. That you have this akaranta pullinga pratipadika Rama. So the dvivachana forms for these three vibhakti, tritiya, chaturthi, panchami, all these three vibhakti, the dvivachana forms are the same. Ramabhyam, Ramabhyam, Ramabhyam. And similarly, for Shashti and Saptami also, these two forms are the same. Okay, and we already saw for the Prathama and Dutiya vibhakti. Okay, and now if you think about this, so under this dvivachanam, there were supposed to be 8 forms, right? Prathama, Dutiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, like this, there are supposed to be 8 different forms. But in actuality, there are only 3 different forms. So instead of 8 forms, you only have to remember 3 forms if you think about it. And again, this observation holds true for other kind of pratipadikas also. See, Nadi. Nadi also, you see, same thing. That Nadyo, Nadyo same, Nadibhyam same, and Nadyoho same. So you don't have to remember 8 forms. You only have to remember 3 forms. Okay, same thing holds for Ukaranta Napumsaklinga Pratipadika. Same thing holds for a Sakaranta Napumsaklinga Pratipadika. Same thing holds for a Takaranta Pullinga Pratipadika. And same thing is going to hold for any other kind of Pratipadikas also. Okay, so these are the kind of observations that I mean. That when you start, if you see them like they are different Pratipadikas, so many 24 forms for each Pratipadika, so much work, no. Don't be intimidated. Take your time and start to observe these little things. Start to compare them with each other. Try to see these observations, that what are different forms that repeat, and that is going to reduce your work a lot. Okay, so as they say, no, it is not always about working hard. It is also about working smart. So that is that smart work. Okay. Anyways, let us move on and see other observations also. Now what I am saying, the Bahuvachana forms for Chaturthi and Panchami Vibhakti, they are also same. So the Bahuvachana forms for Chaturthi and Panchami, they are also same. We can see here. See, Bhagavadabhyah, Bhagavadabhyah. And again, this same pattern you are going to observe across different categories of Pratipadika. Ramebhyah, Ramebhyah. Nadibhyah, Nadibhyah. Okay, so this is another observation that can help reduce our work. Then what about another observation? Ekvachana forms for Panchami and Shashti Vibhakti are mostly same. Okay, this observation holds true for 99% of Pratipadika. There are only few exceptions here and there. And you can see here that the Ekvachana form For Panchami and Shashti, they are also same. See, Nadi and Ikaranta Pratipadika, Nadyaha, Nadyaha, both of them the same form. Same thing you can see for Madhu and Ukaranta Napumsaklinga Pratipadika, Madhunaha, Madhunaha. Same thing you can see for Karman and Nakaranta Napumsaklinga Pratipadika, Karmanaha, Karmanaha. Same thing you can see for Vacha, a Chakaranta Strilinga Pratipadika, Vachaha, Vachaha. So this observation also holds true for almost all the Pratipadikas. The exception is only this Akaranta Pratipadika. But apart from this Akaranta category, for all other Pratipadikas category, this observation also stays true. So again, it reduces our work. Then what else? So we have Sambodhana. The Sambodhana forms are same as Prathama Vibhakti except Ekvachana. And it is also true that the Sambodhana forms for the Pratipadikas is same as the Prathama Vibhakti forms. The exception only occurs in the Ekvachana. Otherwise, Dvivachana, Bahuvachana, the Sambodhana forms is same as the Prathama Vibhakti forms. And again, you can verify this point also using different categories of Pratipadika. Now, if we move on, so now the Ikarant forms are very similar to the Ukarant forms for a given gender. That for a given gender, say if I am talking about Pullinga Pratipadika, masculine gender Pratipadika, so an Ikaranta Pullinga Pratipadika and a Ukaranta Pullinga Pratipadika, their forms are very similar to each other. And why I say so? So let's take this example. We have this example Kavi. Kavi is an Ikaranta Pullinga Pratipadika, correct? And for this kind of Pratipadika, these are all the forms. Okay, these are all the Vibhakti forms, all the 24 forms. And now let me in parallel take an Ukaranta Pullinga Pratipadika also. See, Kavi is an Ikaranta Pratipadika ending with a E and Bhanu is an Ukaranta Pratipadika ending with a U. But both of them are Pullinga. So they are of the same gender. And now see what I mean when I say the Ikarant Ukarant forms are very similar to each other. Why I say? See, Kavi in Prathama Vibhakti becomes Kavihi. So you add the Visarga, right? So Bhanu also becomes Bhanu. Then in Dvivachana, Kavi becomes Kavi. Basically, the Swara is made Dirgha. Here it is Raswa E, but in the Dvivachana forms, it becomes Dirgha E, Kavi. So same thing happens for the Bhanu also. That Bhanu, that last Swara is made Dirgha. Okay, same kind of change. And then for Bahuvachana, Kavi becomes Kavayaha. That for this Kavi, you get rid of this Swara, E Swara, and you add a Yaha. So it becomes Kavayaha. And a similar kind of change happens for Bhanu also. That for Bhanu, you get rid of this U Swara and you add a Vaha, Bhanavaha. And now you can ask this question that how this change is same. Kavi becomes Kavayaha, but Bhanu becomes Bhanavaha. There is an addition of Yaha and there is an addition of Vaha. How they are same? But then again in Sanskrit, very often you are going to notice this thing that this E Swara and this Ya, Vyanjana, they are connected with each other. That is what you see in Yana Sandhi also. That E, this changes into Ya. And for U, it changes into Va. So there is a connection that you will observe in Sanskrit between E and Ya, between U and Va. These kind of connections are very common. And keeping that kind of connection in mind, you can see that Kavi, if this becomes Kavayaha, so Bhanu, this U will be replaced by Va. So Bhanu will become Bhanavaha. But it is a similar kind of change. That is what I mean. Okay, let us see more. Kavi in Dutiya Vibhakti Ekvachanam becomes Kavim and so does Bhanu. Bhanu becomes Bhanum. Kavi becomes Kavina. So Bhanu becomes Bhanuna. Kavi becomes Kavaye. And we have already seen that with an E, the replacement is Ya. So with U, the replacement will be Va. So if Kavi becomes Kavaye, so Bhanu, this becomes Bhanave. Again a similar kind of change. Then you see the Dvivachana. Kavi becomes Kavibhyam, 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 the addition of Bhyam. Same thing happens for Bhanu. Bhanu becomes Bhanubhyam, Bhanubhyam, Bhanubhyam. Same kind of change. Okay, and then you see Kavi becomes Kavehe for Panchami and Shashti. Kavehe. E changing into A. This is what we have seen in Guna Sandhi, that E becomes A. So keeping this relation in mind, we can see Kavi becomes Kavehe. So similarly, Bhanu, U changes into O. That is the connection, right? U has a connection with O. So if Kavi becomes Kavehe, so Bhanu, it becomes Bhanoho. Bhanoho. Again, a similar kind of change. Okay, and that is what I mean when I said that for a given gender, an Ikarant and Ukarant forms, they are very similar. That if you know a Ikaranta forms, then it is a high probability that you will be able to write down the Ukaranta forms also. Because the changes are very similar to each other. I am not saying they are same forms. I am saying the kind of changes they show, it is very similar. It is up to you to see these patterns. And in Sanskrit, it is important that you start noticing these patterns. Okay, because whatever is happening at the back end, same kind of Ashtadhyayi rules are being applied, right? That is why all these changes are coming up. So, and there are only certain amount of rules. So these changes always have some connection with each other. Okay. So I hope you get the true intention behind this observation that ikarant and ukarant forms for a given gender are same. Okay. These subtle things, these important observations help reduce our work. Okay. Now moving on, we have this another observation, and this observation is also very important. It is going to save a lot of work. Okay. What is this observation? So all the Vyanjana ending Pratipadikas. So all the Pratipadikas that end with any consonant, say Manas, it is ending with a consonant, right? So all the Vyanjana ending Pratipadika, their forms are also very similar to each other. Except the Prathama and Dutiya Vibhakti. That except the Prathama and Dutiya Vibhakti, their forms will be slightly unique. But apart from Prathama and Dutiya Vibhakti, from Tritiya Vibhakti onwards, all kinds of Vyanjana ending Pratipadikas, their forms are very similar to each other. Okay, and again to demonstrate this point, let us take this example of Manas Pratipadika. Manas, it is a Sakaranta and neuter gender Pratipadika, Napumsakalinga Pratipadika. But our focus here is that it is a Vyanjana ending, it is a consonant ending Pratipadikas. And I have just taken few forms as an example to demonstrate this point. Okay, so this Manas Pratipadika in Ekvachanam has this form Manasa in Tritiya Vibhakti, Manase, Chaturthi Vibhakti, Manasaha, Manasa, Panchami Shashti, and all these are different forms, right? And now let me take another kind of Pratipadika. Now let us compare this with Vedas. Vedas is also a Sakaranta Pratipadika, but Vedas is a masculine gender Pratipadika. Manas, it is a neuter gender. Okay, so technically Manas and Vedas, they should have different kind of forms. But that is the point I am trying to demonstrate here. That for all the consonant ending Pratipadikas, except the Prathama and Dutiya Vibhakti, from the Tritiya Vibhakti onwards, their forms are very similar to each other. See, Manas, this becomes Manasa in Tritiya Vibhakti. Similarly, Vedas becomes Vedasa. Manas becomes Manase. Similarly, Vedas becomes Vedase. And similarly, you can see here also that for Shashti and Saptami, Manasoho, this is the form. Similarly, Vedas has the form Vedasoho. If Manas becomes Manasam, so Vedas becomes Vedasam. So see that technically even though there are different kinds of Pratipadika, but the kind of forms they have, they are very similar to each other. If you know one type of form, you will be able to guess the form of other Pratipadika also. And see, this observation does not just apply to Sakaranta Pratipadika. Now let us compare this Sakaranta Pratipadika with the Chakaranta Pratipadika. See, it is how different they are. It is ending with a Sa and it is neuter gender. And this Vach, it is ending with a Cha and it is a feminine gender Pratipadika. How different they are technically, but still see how very similar their forms are. Manas becomes Manasa, so Vach becomes Vacha. If Manas becomes Manasaha, so Vach becomes Vachaha. If Manas becomes Manasi, so Vach becomes Vachi. If Manas becomes Manasoho, so Vach becomes Vachoho. If Manas becomes Manasam, so Vach becomes Vacham. See how similarly they decline. Okay, I hope you are getting this point. Let us take another example. Now compare Manas with Ayush. It is a Shakaranta Pratipadika, but again you will see the similarity in the forms. Manasaha Ayushaha. Manasoho Ayushoho. Manas becomes Manasam, Ayush becomes Ayusham. Now let's take a Takaranta Pratipadika ending with a Ta. So Bhagavat, this becomes Bhagavata. Now you know Manas becomes Manasi. So you can guess that Bhagavat and another consonant ending Pratipadika will also become Bhagavati. If you know Manas becomes Manasoho, so you can guess that Bhagavat will become Bhagavatoho, because same kind of forms they have. And same thing you can observe for a Nakaranta Pratipadika also. Manase, Atmane, Manasa, Atmana, Manasoho, Atmanoho, same kind of declensions. Okay, so I hope you get this important observation that for all the Vyanjana ending Pratipadikas, their forms are very similar to each other except Prathama and Dutiya because they are slightly unique in their own way. But now see how easy it becomes, because otherwise there are so many different kinds of categories. Vach, a Chakarant word. Manas, a Sakarant word. Bhagavat, a Takarant word. How many forms do I have to remember? No. If you only remember just Manas, then you will be able to guess the forms of these different words also, because you have noticed these observations. And that is precisely why I'm taking these observations, that these observations are important. See, I'm not mentioning all the important observations here because otherwise the video will stretch far too long. But I'm attempting that you should develop this habit that don't see these concepts, these things in isolation. All these concepts, all these things, they are related to one another. Try and see the connection with each other. Try and compare one thing with another. That in that way, the learning becomes easy and the learning becomes more joyous also. Okay, so all these observations, they are important. Don't be intimidated. So many pratipadikas, so many forms. Don't be intimidated. Try and see some connection. Try and see these observations, and then the workload becomes so much lesser. Okay, so these observations, these things, they are important. I hope I am able to distill this point in some way or another. Okay. Okay, so let's quickly glance over a few other observations. All the sarvanama pronouns, all the pratipadikas that denote a sarvanama, a pronoun, their forms are very similar to each other also. Now I will leave it up to you that compare different kinds of sarvanamas with each other and see this point. Okay, let us move on and see this another observation. For a neuter gender word, the prathama and dvitiya vibhakti, they are always the same. See, madhu, a neuter gender pratipadika, for prathama and dvitiya vibhakti, exact same forms. You can see here. Exact same forms. And same thing goes for another neuter gender pratipadikas also. Say you have this manas, a sakaranta neuter gender. Again, prathama dvitiya, same forms. Same thing goes for a nakaranta neuter gender. Prathama dvitiya vibhakti, same forms. And same thing you might have noticed for phala also. Phalam phale phalani, phalam phale phalani. So for neuter gender, the prathama and dvitiya vibhakti forms same. So again, if you see like this, prathama and dvitiya vibhakti, there are in total 6 different forms. But are there 6 different forms? No, there are only 3 forms because they are same. So again, less work. Okay, let us see this last observation, that ikarant and ukarant neuter gender forms are very similar to nakarant forms. Basically what I am saying is, for a neuter gender word, the ikarant and ukarant forms are very similar to a nakarant forms. So for example, a neuter gender word, say madhu. Madhu is a neuter gender word, a ukarant neuter gender word. So its form will be very similar to nakarant form. So say for example, word like karman. So for these neuter gender forms, their forms are very similar to the nakarant forms. Again, this I will leave it up to you. You can compare it with and you will see this observation work out. Okay, so I hope with this, I am able to put forth my point regarding these pratipadikas. That don't be intimidated that there are so many pratipadikas, so many forms. No, find these connections, find these observations, and then what seems like so much work, it is not actually that much work. Okay, so I hope I was able to put forth my point correctly. And now see, to help you further, as we already know this thing, that suppose you know one word, say Rama. Rama is a akaranta pullinga pratipadika. Suppose you know only the forms of this Rama, but if you know a form of one word, then whatever words that follow the same category as Rama, what is the category? Akaranta pullinga. That is the category of the pratipadika, right? So all the words that are under this category of akaranta pullinga, vriksha, balaka, nripa, all these words, they are going to have the same kind of forms as Rama. So if you know Rama only, then just by knowing Rama, you know all these forms also. Vriksha, nripa, all these forms also. Okay. So what you should do, for every popular category, for every category of pratipadika, take one word as an example and try to memorize the forms of that word. That will become your reference word. That for akarant pullinga, Rama is your reference. Because you know the forms of Rama, so you know the forms of all the words that follow the same category of akarant pullinga. So for every category of pratipadika, pick one as an example word, memorize its form, and that will become your reference for all the other words. Okay, that is important. So in order to help you with this, I am giving you few example words that you should note down and you can memorize the forms of these words. Okay, so let's see few reference pratipadika forms that you can memorize that will help a lot when reading Sanskrit shastras. So you can take balaka as a reference for all the akaranta pullinga pratipadikas. Similarly, you can take phala as a reference word for all the akaranta napumsaklinga pratipadika. So say you have pustaka, that is also akaranta napumsaklinga pratipadika. If you know the form of phala, you know the form of pustaka also, because they will follow the same kind of forms. So phala will be your reference for all the akaranta napumsaklinga pratipadikas. Similarly, for ikaranta pullinga, take kavi as an example. For ukaranta pullinga, take guru as an example. Okay. Then for ikaranta strilinga, take mati. For ukaranta strilinga, take dhenu. Then for ikaranta strilinga, take saraswati. For akaranta strilinga, take sita. See, I am just giving you a reference word. I am not saying that only take Saraswati. If you want to take Nadi, okay, take Nadi. Memorize the forms of Nadi only. If you know the form of Nadi, then you will know the form of Saraswati also. All the Ikarant Pratipadikas, Strilinga Pratipadika, you will know the form. Okay, so what one word you want to take as a reference, that is your choice. I am just giving a suggestion here. Okay, so moving on, for Sakarant Pullinga, take Vedhas. And for Sakarant Napumsaklinga, take Manas. You rarely find a Sakarant Strilinga Pratipadika. That is why I have not included it here. Either you will have a Pullinga or Napumsaklinga. Okay, similarly, for Takaranta Pullinga, Bhagavat. And for Takaranta Napumsaklinga, Jagat. Bhagavat means God, Jagat means world. So you can take these Pratipadikas as the reference. Okay, and if you move on, for Nakaranta Pullinga, take Atman as the reference word. And for Nakaranta Napumsaklinga, take Karman as the reference word. Then for Ikaranta Napumsaklinga, Vari. Vari means water. So take Vari as a reference word. And for Ukaranta Napumsaklinga, take Madhu, honey, as the reference word. Okay, and then you can also take this Chakaranta Strilinga Pratipadika Vach as a reference word. Okay, and with this, we wrap up our overview of Namapada. That what all we need to know about Namapada, that will help us to identify all the Namapadas in a given verse that we are reading in Sanskrit. Okay, so in our categories of words, the Namapada is taken care of. Let's see the Kriyapada now. So Kriyapada, that is identifying the verbs present in the Sanskrit verse. And for a Kriyapada, these are the essential things that you should absolutely know for all the Kriyapada. This, see, it is the same kind of thing. That for a Namapada, I told you 4 things. That for every Namapada, you should know the Pratipadika, the Linga, the Vibhakti and the Vachana. Similarly, whenever you spot any Kriyapada in a Sanskrit verse, these are the 4 essentials that you should know. That from what dhatu this Kriyapada is coming, what is the Lakara, what is the Purusha and what is the Vachana. Okay, so suppose you are reading any Sanskrit verse and then you spot this pada pathet and you spot that it is a Kriya pada. So for this pathet, you should know the dhatu, from which dhatu this pathet is coming from. What is the lakara, in what Purusha it is and in what Vachana it is. These are the 4 essentials for all the Kriya pada that you should absolutely know. Okay, and how do we get Kriya pada? So again, we start with the dhatu and then based on the lakara, the Purusha, the Vachana, this dhatu gets changed into a particular verb form and that particular verb form is called Kriyapada. So this is how it changes from dhatu. Using a lakara, Purusha, Vachana, you get a Kriyapada. And so again, you'll be familiar with this table that you have a lakara, say lit lakara, lung lakara, and then you have prathama purush, madhyama purush, uttama purush, ek vachana, dui vachana, bahu vachana. So this 3x3 table, this works for the Kriyapada. Okay, so if we go back to our example verse, Karmanya Vadhika Raste, in that verse, we spot this pada astu. And this astu, this is a Kriyapada. This is a verb. So for this astu, we should be able to identify those 4 things. The dhatu, lakara, purusha and the vachana. Which in this case, astu, this Kriyapada is coming from as dhatu. So the dhatu is as dhatu. As dhatu means to be, to become. That is this as dhatu. And this dhatu in lot lakara. What is lot lakara? It is imperative mood in Sanskrit. Okay. So as dhatu in lot lakara, in prathama purusha and in ek vachana becomes astu. So for our example Kriyapada astu, the dhatu is as dhatu, lakara is lot lakara, purusha is prathama purush and vachana is ek vachana. So for any given Kriyapada, these are the 4 essentials that you should be able to identify whenever you are reading any Sanskrit text. Okay, so that another example Kriyapada that I gave, pathet. So for this pathet also, if you know, so the dhatu is pat dhatu. It is coming from pat dhatu. That is a dhatu. What is the lakara? So it is a vidhiling lakara. A lot of you might be able to identify this thing, that this pathet, this is a vidhiling lakara, potential mood. What is the purusha? It is the same, prathama purusha. What is the vachana? It is the same, ek vachana. But again, it is like a self-check. That for any Kriyapada that we spot, we should be able to identify these 4 things also. Okay, so keep this pointer in mind. For a Kriyapada, dhatu, lakara, purusha, vachana, this is absolute must. Okay, you should be able to spot these things. Okay, and now let us talk about few more things regarding this Kriyapada that is going to help us identify these Kriyapadas better. Okay, so now let's take another example dhatu. So this is ya dhatu. Ya dhatu means to go. Okay, in that same meaning you have gam dhatu also, that is more common. But similarly, with this similar meaning you have another dhatu, ya dhatu, that also means this. Ya dhatu means to go. And this dhatu in lot lakara, prathama purusha, ek vachana, this dhatu becomes yatu. This is the form it makes, yatu. And now let us go back to our example verse from Ashtavakra Gita, Mai Anant Maham Bodhav. in this verse, when we did the Vicheda, we spotted these different words. And in those words, we spotted this ayatu. This ayatu as the Kriya Pada. Okay, but in the previous slide, you saw yatu. Yatu was the Kriya Pada that you saw in the previous slide. Here you find the word ayatu. Okay, so what is it? Is it a different kind of Kriya Pada, different dhatu, or is there something else? So that something else is this upsarga a. You have the Kriya Pada yatu only, but this Kriya Pada is along with the upsarga a. So the word becomes ayatu. And in Sanskrit, you have the upsargas, the prefix, which are generally used along with a dhatu. Okay, these are prefix, so they attach before the dhatu. Okay, and what do these upsargas do? So these upsargas basically enhance the meaning of the dhatu, or they in some cases change the meaning of the dhatu. But whatever they do, the point is there are certain things called as upsargas, prefixes, which attach themselves to the dhatu. Okay, and now see the point I'm trying to make here. See, in Sanskrit, there are only 22 upsargas. There are only 22 prefixes that are mentioned here. And if you are able to keep these 22 upsargas in your mind, okay, these are very easy to memorize. So if you are able to memorize these 22 upsargas, then it helps you identify the Kriya Pada better. Because whenever you see any Kriya Pada, if you are able to spot the upsarga, and if you are able to remove that upsarga, then whatever remains, that helps you identify the dhatu better. Because the moment you see this yatu, immediately you can see this ya as the dhatu. Because this form, yatu, pathatu, gachatu, vadatu, these forms are very common. So immediately you will be able to recognize this yatu, and with this yatu you will be able to recognize the dhatu as ya dhatu. Because this you can only do when you are able to separate the upsarga from the Kriya Pada. So that is why being aware of these 22 upsargas, it is important. Because when you are able to spot these upsargas and you are able to see the Kriya Pada without that upsarga, then that form, that Kriya Pada forms gives you a better understanding of from what dhatu it is coming in. Okay, this might just take this thing as a on its face value right now. When you will practice Sanskrit, then this point, remember this point, that when you try and remove the upsargas from a Kriya Pada, then that form that remains, that helps you understand the dhatu even better. So just remember this point, and whenever you are practicing Kriya Pada, try to imbibe this point. Okay, and that is why I brought up this topic of upsarga also. Because again, there are only 22 of them and they are so easy to memorize. So memorize these upsargas, it helps you. It helps you in a lot of different ways. Okay, so in our example, ya dhatu is along with the upsarga a. That is why the form was ayatu. That is what we saw in the verse. Okay. Similarly, in that same verse, you also have this Kriya Pada udetu. Okay. And by looking at this Kriya Pada, you may not be able to understand from what dhatu it is coming. But if you know that there is a upsarga ut, there is a upsarga ut or also ud. Okay, due to some changes it becomes ud. But if you know there is a upsarga ut or ud, then you will be able to immediately see this udetu as etu. You will be able to see this Kriya Pada without the upsarga, etu. And this form etu might help you better in identifying from what dhatu it is coming in. See, you might not be able to identify the dhatu just as of now. Because as of now, you are still learning these dhatus, you are still learning these forms. But what I'm saying, when you have learned few dhatus, when you have learned few forms, then when you see the Kriya Pada without the upsarga, then that Kriya Pada very easily takes you to the dhatu. That is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so this Kriya Pada udetu, when you remove the upsarga ud, so what you are left with is this etu. And immediately a lot of you will be able to notice that this etu comes from e dhatu. E dhatu also means to go. So now you'll be able to identify the dhatu behind the Kriya Pada that you read in the verse. That it is coming from ut plus e dhatu. And that is why the form is udetu. Okay, so now with this form you'll be able to spot all the four essentials. That udetu, dhatu is e dhatu, lakara is lot lakara, prathama purusha ekvachanam. Okay, so in our existing list as to what we should know for every Kriya Pada, I am adding this upsarga. That is, if there is any upsarga along with that Kriya Pada, try to be able to spot it and try to remove it and see the Kriya Pada without the upsarga. That will help you identify the dhatu better. And actually not just this, because upsargas, they add special meanings also. So when you know these upsargas, so you will be able to understand the proper meaning of that Kriya Pada also. That is why identifying these upsargas is important, and that is why I've added that to that list. Okay, and now let us move forward and see one more important thing. See, here is pat dhatu. Pat dhatu means to study. So here is pat dhatu in lat lakara, that is present tense, And these are the forms. Pathati, patata, pathanti, patasi, patata, pathat, pathami, pathavaha, pathamaha. So it is pat dhatu in lat lakara. These are the forms, right? But now see these forms. This is also pat dhatu. This is also lat lakara. But now see the forms. Pathyate, pathyete, pathyante, pathyase, pathyethe, pathyatve. So what happened? The same dhatu, same lakara, lat lakara, but the forms are different now. So what is the difference between these two? The difference is the prayoga. And what is prayoga? Prayoga is what we call voice in English, active voice and passive voice. I am sure all of you are well aware of this active voice and passive voice. So as per the change in voice, the verb forms also change. That is this prayoga. Okay, and what do I mean by that is, if the sentence is in active voice, in Sanskrit it is called as kartari prayoga. So if the sentence is in kartari prayoga, then the sentence will use the kartari verb form. Okay, so for kartari prayoga, the verb form, the kriya pada will also be kartari, in the kartari form. See, you see this example. The sentence is balakaha vedan pathati. Boy studies the Vedas. So it is a normal active voice sentence. It is a kartari prayoga sentence where karta is pradhana. We are emphasizing more on karta, the boy. That boy studies the Vedas. Balakaha vedana pathati. Okay, so since this sentence is the active voice, it is a kartari prayoga sentence. So this kriya pada is also the kartari verb form. It is lat lakara, it is prathama purusha, ekvachanam. All this thing is same, but it is a kartari form, pathati. That is why I said the usual forms that we know of dhatus, those are the kartari verb forms. Okay, balakaha vedana patati, boy studies the Vedas. But now compare this with the same sentence written in passive voice. So in passive voice, the sentence become, the Vedas are studied by the boy. Okay, that is how we change no active to passive. That boy studies the Vedas are studied by the boy. So in karmani prayoga, the passive voice, the verb form is also the karmani verb form. And that is what you can see here. Balakena vedaha pathyante. So see, again, same pat dhatu, same lat lakara, but here the form is different. Here the form is karmani verb form. And here even the vachana is different. Because in karmani prayoga, in passive voice, the kriya, it does not see the karta. It sees the object. It sees the karma. Karmani prayoga means karma pradhana, where the emphasis is given on the karma. That the Vedas are studied by the boy. Who is studying, that is not very important. What is important is the karma. The Vedas are studied by the boy. So when the sentence is in passive voice, when the sentence is in karmani prayoga, so the verb form is also the karmani verb form, which takes the vachana as per the karma. That if the karma is ekvachana, so the kriya pada will also be ekvachana. If the karma here, vedaha, bahuvachanam, so the kriya pada is also bahuvachanam. But again, we are not studying the voices, the prayoga now. The important point regarding kriya pada is, for kartari prayoga, for active voice sentences, we use kartari verb forms. And for karmani prayoga, passive voice sentences, we use karmani verb forms. And these two verb forms are different for the same dhatu in the same lakara. These two forms are different. And just to show you this, when you use Ashtadhyayi website and you go to the dhatu patha and you open any dhatu, say bhu dhatu, so the default forms that you see, bhavati, bhavatah, bhavanti, bhavasi, bhavatah, bhavat, the forms that we are well aware of, these are the kartari forms. If you can see here, these are the kartari forms. And if you drop down, and you go into that second option, bhava karmano, so you get the karmani forms of that same dhatu. Bhuyate, bhuyete, bhuyante. These are the karmani forms to be used with karmani prayoga, the passive voice sentences. So for example, let's see pat dhatu also. You have the pat dhatu, and by default, the kartari forms open up. Patati, patataha, pathanti. But when you are making a sentence in karmani prayoga, so you have to use the karmani forms. Pathyate, pathyete, pathyante. So there's a difference between the prayoga. Okay, so now what we have in the list, that whenever we spot any kriya pada, say sampathyante. So whenever we spot any kriya pada, we should be able to first identify the upsarga. So if you were aware of those 22 upsargas, so very quickly you will be able to spot this upsarga sam. And when you remove this sam, what you're left with is this pathyante. And then by looking at this pathyante, you will be very easily able to identify the dhatu also, that it is a pat dhatu. So the upsarga, if any, was identified, the dhatu is identified pat dhatu, and then the prayoga also. Pathyante, this is the karmani prayoga. That is identified. Then what is the lakara? It is the lat lakara. What is the purusha? It is the prathama purusha. What is the vachana? It is a bahuvachana. Okay, so when you are doing this Sanskrit self-studying, this should be your aim, that for any Kriya Pada, you should be able to spot all these things. See, the most essential is again Dhatu, Lakara, Purusha, Vachana. That is the most essential. But you should also be able to spot the Upsarga and what is the Prayoga, whether it is a Kartari Prayoga or it is a Karmani Prayoga. You should be able to spot that also. Okay, so again, these are your pointers. This should be your checklist. That for any Namapada, the Pratipadika, Linga, Vibhakti, Vachana, these are my checklist. And for any Kriyapada, these 6 things, these are my checklist. Okay, just giving you pointers here. Okay, so I hope so far it is good. Now let us talk about few more important things. See, this Lakara. So we are well aware that this Lakara is basically the different tense and moods. Okay, present tense, past tense, future tense, imperative mood, potential mood. So all these tense and mood, this is what this Lakara, they represent. And in Sanskrit, you have a total of 10 lakaras. Okay, this is the list. Lat lakara, lit lakara, lut, rit, lot, lung, vidling, ashirling, lung and ring. So these are the 10 lakaras that are used in Sanskrit. But again, the Sanskrit book will give you the information on all these 10 lakaras. But we have to prioritize them, right? We have to streamline our process. So instead of directly attempting all these 10 lakaras, try to focus first on these 5 major lakaras. What are the 5 major lakaras? So you have the lat lakara, that represents the present tense. You have rit lakara, that represents future tense. You have lung lakara, that represents past tense. And then you have 2 moods. You have lot lakara, that is imperative mood, when you are making a request, when you are giving an order. And then you have a vidhiling lakara, that means potential mood, when you want to say that work should be done. Okay, so out of all the 10 lakaras, these are the 5 lakaras that you should prioritize first. These are the lakaras that you should pay more attention. You should learn them first. Because these 5 lakaras are very commonly used in Sanskrit text. These 5 lakaras cover most of the requirements that you can have when you are saying something, when you are hearing something in a normal conversation. The language is used for conversation, right? So in a normal conversation, these are the 5 lakaras that cover most of the requirement. Talking about present action, talking about past action, talking about future action, then talking about an action which is said as an order, talking about an action which is said as a request, then also talking about the action that we are saying we have to do, we should do. So this covers all the immediate requirements. Okay, so I hope this point is also clear. And now if you move on, so there is one thing that is called as Gana. Okay, and see this Dhatu Gana, this is a topic that I may well have excluded from this overview video. Okay, because if you are a beginner, you don't need to go deep into this Gana. But the thing is, when we read Sanskrit, when we do our own Swadhyaya, then when we use any book or any source to study Sanskrit, then we come across these words. So we come across this topic, this Gana also, Dhatu Gana. And then we try to go deep into that, and then it can confuse us. Okay, it can stray us from our path. So that is why I'm just giving an overview of this Dhatu Gana also. What is it? And if you have to focus on this Gana, prioritize that also. So that is what we are going to see now. Okay, so in Sanskrit, all the dhatus that are available to us in Ashtadhyayi, through Ashtadhyayi, so all those dhatus are divided into these 10 groups. These 10 groups are called as Gana. Okay, so all the 2259 dhatus that are available to us through Dhatu Kosha, all the dhatus are distributed among these 10 groups. These 10 groups are the 10 Dhatu Gana, Bhwadi Gana, Adadi Gana, Juhotyadi Gana, all these are the names of those Gana. But now see, there is an interesting observation here also. The total dhatus are 2259 dhatus, right? But these 4 Ganas, Bhavadi Gana, Divadi Gana, Tudadi Gana, Churadi Gana, out of all the 10 Ganas, these 4 Ganas alone cover 2012 dhatus. Okay, so out of the total 2259 dhatus, 2012 dhatus are contained in these 4 Ganas, Bhavadi, Divadi, Tudadi and Churadi. Okay, almost 90%, more than 90% of dhatus are contained in these 4 Ganas alone. So again, my question to you will be that if you have to focus on these Ganas, which Ganas you should prioritize? Of course, these 4 Ganas, because these 4 Ganas contain more than 90% of dhatus you are ever going to encounter. So why go directly into those 10 Ganas? It is going to confuse you because each Gana comes with their own characteristic, own properties. Why go into that? Why not cover these 4 Ganas only? Because these 4 Ganas are going to take care of major part of what you are going to ever encounter while reading Sanskrit. Okay, so if you have to study Dhatu Ganas, then focus on these 4 Ganas. You should know them first. You should prioritize all the dhatus that come under these Ganas first. That there are more than 2000 dhatus. And for each dhatu, you will have so many forms. Because lat lakara, 3 into 3, 9 forms. Prathama purush, madhyama purush, uttama purush, ekvachana, dvivachana, bahuvachana. So for each lakara, you have 9 forms. Then you have 10 lakaras. So you have 90 forms. So for each dhatu, you have 90 forms. And you have more than 2000 dhatus. How much I should remember? Again, the work is reduced. Why? Because we are prioritizing it right. We don't have to focus on all the lakaras. We only have to focus on the 5 lakaras. Lat, lung, rit, lot and vidhiling. Okay, see, out of these 5 lakaras also, if you want to prioritize, my priority has always been lat lakara, lung lakara, lot lakara and vidhiling lakara. Out of those 5 also, these are the 4 lakaras that I focus. Lat, lung, lot and vidhiling. Because when I read these shastras, when I read the text, these are the lakaras which I encounter the most. Okay, maybe this is my own observation. Maybe it is not so, but this is what I have observed. So I always prioritize these lakaras, but again, it's because we want to say something done in the future, so that is also important. So I include that lit lakara also. But the point is, out of those 10 lakaras, you don't need to go into those 10 lakaras. Just focus on these 5 lakaras. And then coming to the dhatus. Do I have to remember all the 2000 dhatus? Again, no. See, just like Pratipadika has a category, Akarant Pullinga, so many words under it. Similarly, you have a Gana, you have a Bhavadi Gana. Under that Bhavadi Gana, you have so many dhatus. Just take one dhatu from Bhavadi Gana. And for that dhatu, see the form in these 5 major lakaras. And that is it. So all the dhatus that fall under that same Bhavadi Gana, all those dhatus will have a similar kind of form as to that one dhatu. Okay, so again, the work reduces. So just as what we did for Pratipadikas, that we took some reference words for Akaranta Pullinga Balaka, for Sakaranta Napumsaklinga Manasa. So just as we took reference words for the Pratipadikas, similarly we should have some reference dhatu and their forms for all the dhatus also. And to help you with that, this is just a suggestion that from Bhavadigana, you can take this dhatu, Buddha dhatu. Buddha dhatu means to understand. And for the Buddha dhatu also, just try to memorize the forms for those 5 lakaras only. Same thing, for Divadigana, take this Shush dhatu as a reference. So all other dhatus that fall under this Divadigana, they are going to have more or less the similar kind of form as this Shush dhatu. Then for Tudadigana, you can take this Dish dhatu as a reference. And for Churadigana, you can take this Chur dhatu as the reference. So see, 2000, more than 2000 dhatus? No. You only focus, you only prioritize these 4 dhatus first and their forms in the 5 lakaras. And you will be able to cover so many dhatus. Okay. And see, there is another reason that I picked these dhatus specifically. That for Bhavadi Gana, I picked this Buddha dhatu. All the dhatus, all the 1 dhatu that I have picked from the top 4 ganas, all those dhatus are Ubhayapadi. Now what is Ubhayapadi? I don't want to introduce these technical terms, but you may already be familiar with these things. That some dhatu have forms like Patati, Patata, Pathanti, Patasi, Patata, Patat, ending with this Ti, Taha, Anti. But some dhatus have forms like Sevate, Sevete, Sevante, ending with Te, Ete, Ante. So there's a different kinds of forms. The initial ones, Patati, Patata, Patanti, these are called as Parasmayapadi dhatu. And the forms like Sevate, Sevete, Sevante, these are Atmanepadi dhatu, Atmanepadi forms. So for all these dhatus that we have in Dhatu Kosha, there are 2 kinds of forms. It can be this Ti, Taha, Anti ending, Parasmayapadi, and it can be Te, Ete, Ante ending, the Atmanepadi. So the dhatus that I've picked here for Bhavadigana Buddha dhatu, all these dhatus, all the 4 dhatus are Ubhayapadi. That this same dhatu has both the forms. It has the forms in Parasmapadi also, it has the forms in Atmanepadi also. See, just to show you what I mean by that is, you see this Buddha dhatu, and this belongs to the Bhavadi Gana, right? This is the Gana we're talking about right now. So from Bhavadi Gana, you take this reference dhatu, Buddha dhatu. Why I take this dhatu is because you get to see the Parasmapadi forms also, you get to see the Atmanepadi forms also. So for Lat Lakara, you know that a dhatu like Buddha dhatu has such kinds of forms. Bodhati, Bodhata, Bodhanti. And for Atmanepadi, it has forms like Bodhate, Bodhete, Bodhante. And what is the use of this? So whenever you have any dhatu, any other dhatu, whenever you encounter any other dhatu which belongs to this Bhavadi Gana, if only you know the forms of Buddha dhatu, you will be able to guess the forms of that dhatu also. Does not matter that dhatu is parasmapadi or atmanepadi, because you have seen both kinds of forms. Okay, so for all the bhavadigana dhatus, take this budh dhatu as the reference, learn it, learn the forms, try to memorize the forms in the 5 major lakaras, that is lat lakara, then you have this lit lakara, then you have this lot lakara, then you have this lang lakara, and then you have this vidhiling lakara. Only in these 5 lakaras. Okay, so for all kind of kriya pada, for all kind of dhatu forms, take these dhatus as your reference dhatu and try to memorize their forms, try to make yourself familiar with their forms in these 5 major lakaras. And if you are able to memorize the forms of just these 4 dhatus in just those 5 lakaras, you will be covering so many other dhatus in so many different forms that you are going to encounter while reading Sanskrit Shastras. Okay, and with this, we wrap up our overview of Kriya Pada also, that what all we needed to know about these Kriya Padas, the essentials that can help us better identify the verbs in a given Sanskrit shloka, in a given Sanskrit verse. Okay, so for any given Sanskrit verse, these 2 major categories, the Namapada that covers all the nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and the Kriya Pada that covers the verbs, these categories are covered. And trust me, if you can only focus on these 2 categories, Namapada and Kriyapada, then rest everything is a piece of cake. Because avyaya, as we will see now, these are words which have a fixed form. They have a fixed meaning. So whenever you encounter them, you learn them. That okay, for this meaning, this avyaya used. So you encounter them, you learn them. It is very easy. You don't have to worry about what form they will take. They always have that fixed form. They always have that same meaning. So avyaya is a piece of cake. The most important thing was Namapada and Kriyapada. And we have seen how we can approach understanding these Namapada and Kriyapada, right? Okay, and now let us see this another category of words that you encounter in Sanskrit verses. And this category is the avyaya, the indeclinables. And since just by their look, they look exactly like any other Namapada. So how do we know that whether it is a Namapada for which we have to identify Pratipadika and all, or it is an avyaya? How do we know that? See, the only way is you have to know that this is an avyaya. So the more you read Sanskrit verses, the more you understand these avyaya, you learn about these avyaya, you learn about their form, you learn about their meaning, and you keep on memorizing them. You keep on writing them down in your own Sanskrit notes. Okay, so the more you encounter them, the more you learn about them. That is the only way to identify and understand these avyayas. But again, what are the different ways these avyayas are used in a Sanskrit sentence? What are the different ways? What are the different types of avyayas? So for that, we will quickly glance over the few important categories of this avyaya also. So see, this avyaya can be used to indicate conjunction. What does conjunction mean? So when in a sentence, you join 2 words with some another word. So as a conjunction, as a helping word to tie up the meaning of that sentence, we use avyaya to indicate conjunction. Then we also use avyaya to indicate time. We also use it to indicate place, to indicate questions. And then there are few kridantas and taddhitans that are also avyaya. What is a kridanta? What is a taddhitan? If you don't know, don't worry about it. Forget this point. I have just mentioned this point for those who are aware of taddhita and kridanta, that there are few kridantas and few taddhitans which also become avyaya. Okay. And then we also have few miscellaneous uses. So now let's do a quick overview of these kinds of avyaya. Okay, and you can also make notes of these in your own personal notes. Okay, and again, since their form and their meanings are fixed, so learn them as you encounter them. That is the best way to approach these avyayas. Okay, so avyayas indicating conjunction. So basically they are used to tie up the sentence in the sense that cha, that means and. So this and we used to tie up a sentence, right? So cha is and. Va is or, tu is but. Then you have api, which means also. Then you have eva, alone. No, satyam eva jayate. Truth alone wins. Okay, so that is that eva, alone. Then you encounter this he in the use of indeed. Okay, to give that emphasis. Okay, then you have ataha, therefore. Then you have tataha, thereafter. Then you have these combinations also. Yadyapi and tathapi. Yadyapi, even though. Tathapi, then also. And we frequently use them in these pairs also, no? That yadyapi tathapi, even though this, then also something else. So we very frequently use this avyaya in a pair. We can use them alone also, but they are generally seen in these pairs. Okay. Similarly, you have yavat and tavat. Yavat as long. Tavat till then. And yavat and tavat can also be used in the sense of quantity. Yavat in the sense of as much. And tavat in the sense of that much. Then you also have yatha tatha. Yatha is just as, tatha is even so. So all these avyayas indicating conjunction very frequently you are going to encounter in your Sanskrit text. So pay attention to these avyaya and try to memorize their meaning. Okay. And then you have avyayas which are indicating time. So suppose you want to say today, so that is this adya. Tomorrow, shwaha. Yesterday, hyaha. In the day, diva. At the night, naktam. Then you have then. Okay. Then that happened. So tada. Then similarly you have yada, when. Ekada, once. Sada, always. Okay, you can already see all these are in the sense of a time. Okay, in that time reference. So all these are in the sense of indicating time. Okay, then suppose you want to say long ago. So pura or ado. Ado is also used in the sense of in the beginning. So in the beginning, ado. Then if you want to say now, so that is idanim. That is very frequently used. Or adhuna. And you also have atha. Okay, atha Shri Mahabharat Katha. And now the Mahabharat Katha. So now atha, adhuna, idanim, you have multiple options here. And then you have sampratam. Sampratam, currently, at this time. So in Ramayana, no, konaswin sampratam loke. Who at this current time. So that current at this time, that is that sampratam. But again, if you don't have all these avyayas already, you can pause these videos here and you can note down these avyayas. Okay. So avyayas which indicate place. So everything that is related to a place. So those avyayas are, suppose you want to say inside. So antaha, that is why we say antaha karana. Okay. That inside. Then bahihi, outside. Okay. Adhaha, that is downwards or below. Urdhvam, that is upwards or above. Okay. Urdhvamulam adhashakham. In that Bhagavad Gita shlokam. Urdhvamulam adhashakham. So those sense. Then you have upari, on or upon. Then you have purataha, in front of. Prishtataha, behind. Ubhayataha, on both sides. So all these avyayas you can see, duram, far, samipam, near. And then you have these, tatra, there. Yatra, where. Atra, here. Iha, here. Sarvatra, everywhere. So all these avyayas you can clearly see they are indicating place with reference to a place. Okay, so again you can pause the video here and you can note down if you don't have this list already. Okay, this is going to help you in your building the vocabulary for avyaya. Then you also have avyayas which are used to indicate a question. What? So kim. How? Katham. Why? Kimartham. How many? Kati. How much? Talking in a quantity, how much? Kiyat. When? Kada, where, kutra, from where, kutaha, isn't it? Kila. Okay, and then you have few kridantas which are also avyaya. Again, if you don't know what are kridanta, what are tadhitant, leave it. But for those who know, so there are few kridantas which are also avyaya. The twa ending, lyap ending, tumun ending kridantas. So these three kridantas are also avyaya. So they have a fixed form with the fixed meaning. And then you also have few common tadhitant that are used as an avyaya. So vat ending tadhitant. Vat in the sense of like. No, we say ramavat. Like Rama. So that ramavat, that is also an avyaya. Similarly, taha ending. Taha in the sense of from. So if I say gramataha, from the village. But this word gramataha, this becomes an avyaya. So the vat ending tadhitant, the taha ending tadhitant, they also become an avyaya. So fixed meaning, fixed form. Again, if you don't know what are tadhitant, leave it for now, not to worry. And then we also have lot of avyayas with so many miscellaneous use. See, no or not, na or nahi. Ma is do not. In the example verse we saw, ma phaleshu kadachana, do not in that sense. Then iti or itham used in the sense of thus. Evam used in the sense of like this or this way. Then you have nyunam, which is less. Ativa, which is much. Ashu, which is quickly. Tushanim, which is quietly. Sadhu, good, well. So all these are again different avyayas with miscellaneous uses. Okay, and this much is alright for avyaya at this point. Again, the more you encounter them, the more you have to memorize them and the more you will become familiar with these avyayas and their uses. Okay, and with this, we wrap up all the three categories of words that you find in any Sanskrit verse. The Namapadas, the Kriyapadas and the avyayas. But before wrapping this all up, there is one more important thing that I just want to introduce here. And that is the pratyaya, that is the suffixes in Sanskrit. So see, what are pratyaya, suffixes in Sanskrit? Now before introducing them to you, let me quickly say this thing, that the real power that Sanskrit have, that when we study Sanskrit, we see that Sanskrit virtually have infinite words. And Sanskrit has the power to create even more words, that it can virtually keep on creating more and more words. This power comes from these grammatical tools, which are suffixes or pratyaya in Sanskrit. Okay, what is a pratyaya basically? So pratyaya, think of pratyaya like something that when added to something else, it creates another thing. Okay, so for instance, if you take a dhatu and if you add a pratyaya to it, then that pratyaya is going to modify that dhatu and create something new out of it. Same thing goes for pratipadika also, that you take a pratipadika, you take a certain suffix, certain pratyaya, that pratyaya will modify that pratipadika and create something entirely new. So this is the power of pratyaya, of suffixes in Sanskrit. Okay, and you may not be aware, but we have already encountered few suffixes before. See, there is a certain kind of suffix which is called as ting pratyaya, ting suffix. What does it do? So this ting pratyaya modifies the dhatu and creates a tinganta. Now this tinganta is just a technical term. What do I mean by that is, from dhatu, the process of creating a kriya pada, that from this pat dhatu, you get this pathati. So of course, some modification is happening in this pat dhatu so that you are getting this form pathati. So who is doing that modification? What is happening? So the pratyaya which modifies a dhatu and creates a kriyapada, the technical name for it is tinganta, creates a tinganta. These pratyaya are called as ting pratyaya. Okay, so it is a certain kind of pratyaya with a certain function. Okay, so in our example here, with pat dhatu, you have this tip. What is this tip? This is just ting pratyaya. Okay, a form of ting pratyaya. And what does it do? It creates a tinganta. What do I mean by that is, it creates a kriyapada. So from pat you get pathati, from pat you get patishyami, from pat you get pathet. All this modification, that from a dhatu you are creating a kriyapada, you are creating a tinganta. All this is done, this modification is done using ting pratyaya. Okay, and similarly we have encountered another type of pratyaya also. From pratipadika, when we create a namapada. So from pratipadika, the modification into this namapada, for which the technical term is subanta. So this modification is also done by another kind of pratyaya, which is called as supratyaya. So for instance, you have this namapada Rama Nam, and we know this comes from the pratipadika Rama. So again, some modification might have happened in this Rama, which made Rama into Rama Nam. So who is doing that modification? Supratyaya. Supratyaya are the one who are doing this modification and creating different kinds of namapada. Okay, so in a similar way, in Sanskrit, we have a few important categories of different suffixes, different pratyaya. You have already seen the function of ting, you've already seen the function of supratyaya. Then we also have pratyayas called as sanadi pratyaya, stri pratyayaha, krit pratyayaha, and tadhita pratyayaha. These are few categories of suffixes of pratyaya in Sanskrit, and they have their own role, whether they operate on a dhatu, whether they operate on a pratipadika, and what kind of a new word they create. So for all different kinds of modifications, we have these sets of pratyaya, these categories of pratyaya in Sanskrit. But out of all these pratyaya, when we are starting, there's only one pratyaya we need to focus on, and that is this krit pratyayaha. This category of pratyaya is the one that should be our top priority when we are starting with Sanskrit. And what does krit pratyaya do? So krit pratyaya, it modifies a dhatu and creates a kridanta. It modifies a dhatu and creates a kridanta. But what are kridantas? So think of kridantas as adjectives only. That these kridantas, they are the words that either describe the karta or the karma. And see, these kridantas are slightly peculiar because they not only give you the flavor of adjective, they also give a slight flavor of kriya. So these kridantas not only describe certain word as an adjective do, but they also have this flavor of kriya. Okay, that is why these kridantas, they are so important and they are so useful in our day-to-day Sanskrit. In whatever Sanskrit text you are going to read, you are going to start, whether it is a Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, kridantas are very frequently and very commonly used. Okay, and to be able to understand kridantas, we need to be aware of few important krit pratyaya. Okay, so that is the point I'm trying to make here, that there are certain krit pratyayas that we have to focus on. And so that is what I'm mentioning here, that under this category of krit pratyaya, so you have ta pratyaya, tavatu pratyaya, shatru pratyaya, shanach pratyaya, tavyat pratyaya, aniyar pratyaya. So out of all the krit pratyayas, these are the pratyayas that you need to prioritize and you need to learn them first. That what all these pratyaya do and in what way they modify a dhatu. Okay, and apart from this, you also have three more. So you have twa pratyaya, lyap pratyaya and tumun pratyaya. So to that krit pratyaya list, add these three pratyaya also. Okay, and this wraps up our overview of how to approach Sanskrit. If you are a beginner and you want to learn Sanskrit, you have the resources, you have these things available, but what are the different grammatical concepts that you should know about, and among those grammatical concepts also how you should prioritize different rules, different suffixes, different all those different things, how you should prioritize and streamline your learning. So that overview, this wraps up. Let me quickly summarize what we have covered so far. Okay, so to summarize, first step, understanding Sandhi rules, so that we can do Vicheda, we can separate the words in a given Sanskrit shloka, in a given Sanskrit verse, because only when the words are separated, then only we can truly understand the meaning of the entire words. So understanding Sandhi rules, that is the step one. And then we saw there are three major kinds of Sandhis: Swara Sandhi, Visarga Sandhi and Vyanjana Sandhi. And under Swara Sandhi also we saw these are the Sandhis that we need to prioritize. Under Visarga Sandhi, these are the ones we need to prioritize, and under Vyanjana Sandhi, these are the ones we need to learn and know about them first. Okay, so again, while we are doing this summarization, you can pause the video and you can take note of these things. You can take a screenshot, whatever, you can take note of these things. Okay, but that was the step one, understanding Sandhi rules. Then comes the step two, and that is understanding Namapada. Because again, we saw that in a given Sanskrit words, all the words that are in that Sanskrit words, all those words can be categorized into these three categories: Namapada, Kriyapada and Avyaya. So we have to know these categories so that all the words that we are ever going to see in any Sanskrit words, we'll be familiar with those words and we'll know how to approach those words. Okay, so among those word categories, first is the Namapada. And for understanding Namapada, these are the four essentials. That for every Namapada, you should know the Pratipadika, you should know the Linga, you should know the Vibhakti, and you should know the Vachana. And if you are able to do this for all the Namapadas, then identifying a noun, a pronoun, or an adjective in any Sanskrit words, it will become a piece of cake. But of course, it will take some time, it will take consistent practice, but this is the approach that we can take. And then moving on, we have Kriyapadas, the verbs, the action words. And for Kriyapada also, these are the things that we should know. That for every Kriyapada, we should know the Dhatu, the Upsarga, if there is any, the Prayoga, whether it is Karmani Prayoga, Kartari Prayoga, the Lakara, the Purusha, and the Vachana. Okay, if you are able to do this for all the Kriyapadas you encounter, it will be a great practice and it will exponentially improve your Sanskrit understanding. Okay, and then we also saw that out of the 10 Lakaras that we have, focus on these 5 lakaras first: Lat, Lang, Rit, Lot, and Vidiling. Focus, prioritize these 5 lakaras first. Okay, and then learning Avyaya. So Avyaya again, because they have fixed form, fixed meaning. So whenever you encounter them, take note of them and try and memorize them then and there only. Okay, so these 4 steps are the essentials. These 4 steps, if you practice them in this way, with this approach, and if you give consistent practice to it, then these 4 steps are enough to make you confident and to make your Sanskrit understanding a lot better. Okay, and when you are able to accomplish these 4 steps, then there is a 5th step that is very important, and that 5th step is practicing Akanksha. Okay, so this Akanksha, this is a mechanism which helps you decode any given Sanskrit verse. And what this mechanism basically means is, whenever we have any Sanskrit text, Sanskrit verse, Sanskrit shloka in front of us, then in that verse, in that shloka, try and find out the Kriyapada. Once you have find out the Kriyapada, then try and find out the Karta of that Kriya. And then any adjective, any pronoun, any other thing that is related to that Karta. Once Karta is done, then try and find out the Karma of that Kriya. And again, any adjective, any pronoun that is related to that Karma. Once these 3 essential things are taken care of, that you know the Kriyapada, you know the Karta who is doing that action, and you know the Karma, on whom, on what object that action is being done. When you know these 3 essentials, then you try and find out the additional details. Additional details means all other things that are denoted by other Vibhakti cases. So suppose you have Tritiya Vibhakti used when you have to show the instrument. You have Chaturthi Vibhakti used when you want to show the action is done for him. Then you have Panchami Vibhakti in the sense of from or because. Shashti Vibhakti to show the relationship. So all other Vibhaktis, they give you any other additional details present in the sentence. Okay, so once you have figured out the Kriyapada, the Karta, all the things related to Karta, Karma, all the things related to Karma, then figure out any other additional details that is denoted by other vibhakti cases, and also additional details which are denoted by other avyaya words. Okay, so this is the mechanism which is referred to as akanksha. And since this mechanism akanksha is not the scope of this video, so I'll not go deep into it. I was just leaving it here. Why? Because once you know these four things, the sandhi rules, namapada, kriyapada, avyaya, once you know these essentials and how to approach them, then how do you use them? So how to use them, that is this mechanism akanksha that helps you decode any words and arrive at an anvaya of it. Okay, see, if you are familiar with the Sanskrit through Gita series that I do, so in that videos, what I approach, that approach I take is that mechanism akanksha only. That we start with the Kriya Pada, then we inquire about the Karta, the Karma, and other details. So what I do there with those Bhagavad Gita shlokas, that is this akanksha mechanism only. That is what I'm leaving here. I'm just leaving it here. Maybe in some other future video, I'll take this topic akanksha and try and practice with few example verses. But I wanted to culminate that whatever we learned, how to practice it. So how to practice it, that is this akanksha mechanism. That is why I was just introducing it here. But apart from that, I hope all these things that we covered, what we can learn, how to prioritize these things, I hope these things help you in your own Sanskrit self-learning. See, again, as I said in the start of the video, that this is how I have come to understand the way to approach Sanskrit language. Okay, my way can be different than your way. It can be different than any other way mentioned in any other book. All these ways are good. All these ways are fine. The intent of this video is that if you had these confusions, clarifications, or if the bombardment of so much information was intimidating you, then at least you will have a streamlined approach to it. You will know what to learn. Okay, at least you will ask the right questions. Okay, so that was the intent behind this video. I hope it was of some help. I'll meet you with another video with some other information. But until then, stay awesome, stay happy, keep learning Sanskrit. Vayam punah milamaha. Dhanyavad.